Hi, I'm Debbie Ridpath Ohi, children's book author and illustrator. Welcome to Episode 9 of Ask Me to Ask, my YouTube series in which children's book creators answer a question they have chosen themselves. So let's get started.
Hi, I'm Kathleen Burkinshaw, and I'm a Japanese-American author, and this is my middle grade historical fiction, The Last Cherry Blossom.
Okay, it's time to ask the question. Kathleen, what info should I use in my historical nonfiction?
One of the ways would be to try to narrow things down. So you want to decide, well, what time period might I want to do it in? And like for my story, The Last Cherry Blossom, I wanted to do it during World War II. So if you decide on that, is there a particular year that you want to use, or a particular battle that you wanted to focus on? Or perhaps maybe there was a person that you wanted to write about during that time period. So for example, I chose my mom to write about during that time period. And so one of the ways that helped me to kind of get an idea of what I wanted in my story was to do a timeline. And this is the actual timeline that I used when I was writing The Last Cherry Blossom. And I knew that I wanted it to start in 1944, so I started it here. And then I knew I wanted to end it a few months after into 1946. So by doing that, I started off here and I wrote the various months because I felt that maybe I'll do my chapters by month. I wasn't really sure at that point. So here, I hope you can see, I went over in Sharpie so you could see it a little bit better. Now, you may just want to do 1 month of that time period. So you might want to do October, and then you could put week 1, week 2, week 3, and week 4. The next stage that you could do is as you're researching, when I found something that was really interesting that I wanted to cover, I would write it down and I would put it on a sticky note. So for example, when I read in 1945 in March that there was a Tokyo bombing, I knew that I needed to have that in my story. So I wrote it down and then I went to my timeline and I put it in March of 1945. Now, when you're writing about a person, sometimes what happened in their lives may not fit the timeline that you're writing in. So for example, in my mother's, her father got remarried and had a stepmother as a result of that. But that didn't happen during this time period that I was writing the book. It happened prior to that. But I really needed it in there because it kind of defined who she was and what she thought. So I took the wedding and I figured, well, maybe I'll put it in January of 1945. Now, the more that I started getting into the story, I realized it won't fit there. So maybe I'll be better off to put it into 1944 in November. And so as you're going along with your facts and you can put in the various events that happen, the fictionalized part is sometimes you can switch around when an event in that person's life may have happened, as long as it doesn't affect the historical piece of like the actual dates of certain battles or things like that. One of the other things I did is if you want to show the passage of time and you don't want to write today is like it's a diary, you can try to look for newspaper headings of that time period, or I used some propaganda slogans or some radio hour show slogans, and I would write them down on a piece of paper, on a little sticky, and then I would put it where I thought it might work, especially if it wasn't a newspaper date, because then that way you can play around with the slogans a little bit more. And then as I was doing the chapter, I would realize, I'm not really doing anything that relates to that. So I'm going to move it over to this one because that's where it seems to cover it the best. So that was how I kind of moved things around, and it helped me with my outline, and it kind of tightened things up because you kind of have a better idea of where you're going with your story. So I hope that by showing you my timeline, which actually fit all the way across the dining room table, and I used it very, very much. And actually some of the stickies have fallen off because I had moved them so many times. I hope this helped. Bye-bye.